Good morning. It's St. Andrew's Episcopal Church and Friday morning meditation with Sandy Schultz.
Good morning. Today is the feast day of St. Augustine, so I would like to start out with one of his prayers. I beg of you, my God, let me know you and love you, so that I may be happy in you. And although I cannot do this fully in this life, yet let me improve from day to day, till I may do so in the full. Let me know you more and more in this life, that I may know you perfectly in heaven. Let me know you more and more here, so that I may love you perfectly there, so that my joy may be great in itself and complete in heaven with you. O truthful God, let me receive the happiness of heaven, which comes as your promise, so that my joy may be full. In the meantime, let my mind think of it. Let my tongue talk of it. Let my heart long for it. Let my mouth speak it. Let my soul hunger after it. Let my flesh thirst after it. Let my whole being desire it, until such times that I may enter through death into the joy of my Lord, there to continue forever, world without end. Amen. And with that prayer being said, what kind of a personality do you think that he has? Or where do you think his life was going, or where it was coming from? Any thoughts on that?
He was deeply aware of the fact that he couldn't be perfect or perfectly know God here. And he was longing to be a little better each day, as that whole prayer talks about.
Yeah, I definitely, that was the first impression that I had gotten.
This second picture or portrait of him kind of communicates that deep troubledness in him, I think.
Absolutely.
So Sandy, I have the second picture on the screen share with a very troubled looking St. Augustine. And I think that reflects what his prayer that you just read describes.
Excellent, Bill. That is awesome. They were saying that St. Augustine is perhaps the most significant Christian thinker after St. Paul. He adapted classical thought to Christian teaching and created a powerful theological system of lasting influence. He also shaped the practice of biblical writings that helped lay the foundation for much of the medieval Christian thought. Intellectually, Augustine represented the most influential adaptation of the ancient Platonic tradition of Christian ideas that ever occurred in the Latin Christian world. His writings were widely read and imitated throughout the Latin Christendom. That his particular synthesis of the Christian, Roman, and Ptolemaic traditions defined the terms for a much later tradition and a lot of debate.
And the picture that we now have on the screen is of a deeply thoughtful, white St. Augustine with objects in the background that indicate his intellectualism and his broad thinking.
Okay, but what is your thought? Because he was born in Africa, basically pretty close to the Mediterranean Sea. So why is he now whitewashed?
The Roman Church, European, centered in Rome, um, definitely wanted to claim him as one of theirs, a European intellectual. And my goodness, can anything good come out of Africa? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Is that familiar to us or what?
Isn't it bringing everything full circle? We're right there today, aren't we? And what I found interesting too is that he had siblings going back to his earlier years. He had siblings, and yet his parents, even though they were comfortable financially, they borrowed money for him to be educated or to go to a university. And so it seems that even as a child, they were picking up on different things that definitely set him apart from his brother and sister. We know that he had a brother and sister, but we don't know about any others. And during his life, he definitely, you might say, led a life of, even though his mother, Monica, raised him close to Christianity, and he wasn't really, they weren't really religious, but there was a Christianity background there. He kind of took off and met some friends, and he took off and what I guess today we might think of that gang life. And he just went off and did things that he definitely should not have been doing, and enjoying the drinking, the sexual activity, and he even had a son by one of his friends, whatever, companions, and he was raising him, and he passed in early adolescence. And with that being said, he at 36, and that's when his son basically, it was in that time frame that his son passed. And so at that time he said, well, I have no obligation to hand on the family property. So we disposed of it and literally pressed it into a service that would be like a junior clergyman. The transformation, I don't think, was entirely surprising. I would say at that point, Monica, his mother, became Saint Monica. And I'm thinking it was probably due to the fact of all the praying she did, and her prayers were answered, that her son now was coming back and seeing the true God as he is, and not worshiping all the false gods. And so when he's moving on, he decided that he was going to dab a little bit in the Christian religion, and he became a teacher. However, he moved on to Milan because that's where everyone went to make something of themselves, build that career. So what ends up happening is, okay, after a couple years, he'd had enough of that, and that was short-lived. And so he decided to go back to Africa, and his distinctive stance and that style of teaching and writing seemed to be more acceptable in his hometown. And so that articulate of his version of Christianity set him apart from everyone, all of his contemporaries in Africa. So his unique gift to write at a high theological level for the most discerning readers, and he was still able to deliver a sermon with fire and a fierceness that those that may be considered less cultured audience would admire. And from being a priest, he became a bishop, and he definitely continued on. And I guess he was a bishop for 20 years. And so all this was working out very well until, well, the Romans came over and took the city over. And at that point, he was basically lost a whole lot. And he ended up right back in a prison with all of his country people. And still he continued to do his thing and speak and write. But it was interesting because they said that Augustine would survive in his book, and his habit of cataloging them served his surviving collaborators well. Somehow, essentially, the whole liturgy survived and escaped Africa intact after the takeover. And the story was told that his mortal remains went to Italy, and that is where they've been reverenced. It's still there. And I thought that was interesting too. And wrote several books, but Augustine's Confessions recounts the earlier life with the persuasiveness that a lot of the biographers wanted to abridge and put in their purpose, because it told a story of, let's say, a life of self-justification and self-creation. And the book was only moderately successful in his lifetime, but it certainly has triumphed ever since. And perhaps at this time, Bill, you want to share some of your experience, because I know that you had mentioned about your schooling and studying St. Augustine. What would you like to tell us about him, and what are some of the things that you especially remember?
Well, first, the portrait that's on the screen now shows Augustine sitting at a writing tablet. The painting depicts a vision of Mary, Joseph, and the baby, and then Jesus on the cross. On the table is his bishop's mitre, and he has a huge cross around his neck. So that's the latter-day saintly Augustine. And what I remember from reading the Confessions, it was required reading of our literature course in college, among a whole bunch of other philosophical and religious readings. And so it was a comparative kind of course. And what the class discussion focused on, interestingly, was his early years as the prodigal son, as it were, and his carousing, as you described. And the discussion was less about his eventual conversion and becoming a priest and then a bishop. And I think the most memorable for me, one line from the whole Confessions, which was part of the discussion in our class, was, "Make me holy, Lord, but not yet."
Yeah, but not yet. Yeah. I love that one.
And
I love that.
That's what our lives are about, aren't they? Our
Yep.
moving forward, but I don't want to let go of this.
How true. How true. Not yet. Let me just do one more thing. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And what I found interesting in his life too is that his father, he was not particularly religious, as the mother was, and yet baptism, as we know it today, comes as a baby or certainly a young child, and yet it was more like a last sacrament, because his father was baptized basically on his deathbed. And I thought that was a very interesting situation that came as a surprise to me. And then his mother Monica had enrolled him in a pre-baptismal as a church as a young child, and yet he deferred out of prudence that wasn't for him. So he wasn't baptized actually until Saint Ambrose was at his turning point, and he found baptism, and that was when he started to actually practice. So I thought all of this was very, very interesting, and there is just so much about his life. And he also wrote a book that I thought was interesting. Besides Confessions, it was called God's City, and that was another one. Now that one was definitely a very popular book, and it was a city of God, and it was basically talking about the right and wrongs. And to me, he had an amazing life. He went from being a carouser, like you had said, Bill, and into a very, very astute teacher. So he had many, many facets in his life. But I think we ought to stop there because, as I said earlier, I was reading, and 4 hours later, I'm thinking, oh my, this is much too long. So if we could, we'll go into a closing prayer, please. Oh Lord, support us in everything we do today, that it will be in your gracious favor and with your continual, genuine love as we grieve with Christy's family. God, you are a Father. Virgin Mary, the Blessed Mother, you suffered the loss of your Son, Jesus. Please rest your hands upon her parents' shoulders as in their time of grief. You know their sadness. In your mercy, at the day's end, grant us all a peaceful rest. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Have a good day. See you later.